We're
That sounds
thrilled
good.
to have Brad Stamps with us today. Coach Stamps is the head basketball coach of Fayetteville High School in Northwest Arkansas. Stamps has served as an assistant coach at FHS since 2015 and played on the Fayetteville State Championship team in 1987. He served as the head boys basketball coach at a couple stops previously as well. Coach's basketball teams have won 3 conference championships and reached the state quarterfinals, semifinals, and the state finals. He was also named the 2014 KURM Dream Team Coach of the Year. Coach's presentation is titled Reflect and Reset, a Coach's Growth Plan. Coach, thanks for being on today.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate you having me. Look forward to this. Before I start the presentation today, I think it's important to kind of tell everybody how this all began and how it all started for me. Our season ended on March 7th in a state semifinal game. And then, the next Thursday, I guess that's the 13th, we're shut down with COVID-19 and the coronavirus. And so, for me, and I guess a lot of coaches, you go through that reflection piece of your season. And it just happened to be that all of a sudden you have a lot more time for reflection because you're at home and you're quarantined. And so for me, I just started writing everything down, my reflection from season 1 for me back as a head coach at Fayetteville High School at my alma mater. And when I started writing everything down of the season, it just led me to other areas, of my life that I really wanted to get better at. And I had to give an honest assessment with myself of kind of where I wanted to challenge myself and how I wanted to get better. Once I started writing those things down and really locating some areas that I wanted to grow in, I started sharing with my staff. My staff, who's an unbelievable staff. And, I've got Ronnie Brewer, a young man who played for me for 6 years. He played for me in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade at a junior high. And then I was fortunate enough to move up to the high school as an assistant. And then I got to coach him for 10th, 11th, 12th. So having Ronnie for 6 years and then seeing the success he had at Arkansas and then being a lottery pick in the NBA, I'm blessed to have him on my staff, who was also a Fayetteville graduate with myself. My other assistant coach, Nikki Bradford, was a Fayetteville graduate, a Purple Dog alum as well. And, his success at Kansas back in the day, 97, I believe. He was Paul Pierce's roommate at Kansas for Roy Williams and then, went on for a pro career and had the opportunity to bring him back to our alma mater was a big deal. Jeff Bogart and Jordan Rose, both our freshman coaches, have been in it for quite some time in Fayetteville, and they're a big addition to our staff as well. So once I challenged my staff, we kind of got into it, and it's kind of taken off from there. When I share this today, I think it's important to understand this was all set out for me and my personal growth. And so I'm not an expert in any of these areas, and that's why I wanted to grow in these areas. So I hope today that, something that I share may mean something to other people. And maybe I can challenge, you in areas of growth as well. So I'll go ahead and begin my presentation and share my screen here. All right, the title of my presentation, as you mentioned, Jeremy, is Reflect and Reset, and it's a personal growth plan. Reflection for me, really, or what were the high points, the low points from season 1 at my alma mater. This was the big wins, the tough losses. I had to go back and look at some game film and study those things of how we won those close games, maybe how we lost those close games. And when you start doing that, you really figure some things out that maybe you could have done better. Dealing with discipline issues, off the court, on the court as well. Was I consistent with my discipline? Was I respectful to all parties? And was I fair at the end of the day? Then we looked at our day-to-day structure in our preseason. Were we doing what we need to be doing in our preseason to get our guys ready? our in-season planning as far as our practice planning and with our staff of trying to make sure that we were ready for game one, and then from game to game, were we doing what we needed to be doing on a day-to-day structurally. And then our communication with admin, our players, our parents, and all of our stakeholders. Was that communication consistent? Was it clear? Were we doing a good job of making sure everybody understood kind of where we were at? And then what I could have done better, you know, in all areas. My walk, was I doing what I needed to be doing with my wife, my kids, our staff, our players, our school, our boosters, and our community. So reflection for me is I looked at all these areas and what I could have done better to serve. Our personal growth areas of, for me, that I wanted to get better at when I started digging into this, they're really 4 pillars, but mentally, I wanted to grow. Physically, I wanted to do a better job. Spiritually, as well as professionally. So these are the 4 growth areas that I created for myself and wanted to get better at each one. Mentally, for me, was reading. I've never read more before, and if you're like me, you know, I've got a bookshelf in my office just full of books, maybe gifts that other people have given me over the years, and you know, I would start several books, but then I may, you know, not read it all the way through and put it back on the shelf, and I've done that with quite a few books, but really I've dug into really reading a lot. I try to read a book every 2 weeks. I'm getting different people are giving me different books, and I've highlighted those points from those books and maybe taken some notes. I'm reading everything. I'm reading articles, newspapers, blogs. You know, I found some interesting blogs that I've really dug into, and then reading my Bible. Music is a big deal for me. You know, I'm pretty well rounded when it comes to music. I would say my Apple library that I filled up is pretty well rounded. It's anywhere from Willie Nelson to Mozart and everything in between. So I'm constantly listening to music in my morning walks. I live on 7 acres, so you know, I put those earbuds in, and I'm usually listening to music when I'm outside walking, when I'm in my car driving, as well as yard work. I've got a lawn mowing business, and so, you know, when you got 28 yards, you know, I put those earbuds in, and I'm really digging into some music to help me get through it. Writing, this has been a big deal for me personally, spending more time writing things. I've gone back and written letters to family members, former players. I went back, you know, I was a head coach of Shiloh Christian several years back, and that was my first head coaching job. And so I've gone back and really handwritten those guys that played for me on that team some letters. Some of them are married now, some of them have kids. And so really, you know, being a part of their lives and letting them hear from me and how proud I am of them, whether it was church members, boosters, written some thank you for some of the boosters that have done some things for our team, whether it was team meals or just different things. And then the influential people in your life. I think there's a lot of power, Jeremy, I believe, in taking time to handwrite a letter to somebody that means something to you. And I know, you know, if you've ever received those of just going to the mail and picking something out of the mailbox that you may not have expected, and you open it up and it's just a letter of encouragement, maybe, you know, lifting you up. I think there's a lot of power in that. And so we've really challenged our players over the course of the last several weeks of taking time to write a handwritten letter. We get caught up in text messaging or maybe, you know, being on the keyboard, but there's just a personal touch, I believe, that has power when you take the time to handwrite it and put it in the mail. And then journal. Very thankful that I started this. Year one for me, I was given a gift of a journal, a nice journal, and so I've gone back and looked at those journal entries that I have, and you know, and I specifically have dated those journal entries, and you know, that's really just highlighting things from the day, or just teachable moments every day. You have opportunity for something. And so going back and reading some of those journal entries of the days that I was having has been good for me. I would say journal is a big deal for everybody. And if you really look at the time we're in, I'm interested, and I think everybody could be 10 years from now, maybe 15 years from now, of looking back at what we were doing during this quarantine or the coronavirus. Will be interesting. Crossword puzzles. I used to make fun of my mentor, Kyle Adams, when I worked for him. He was always in his idle time was working on crossword puzzles, and I used to give him a hard time. But now I catch myself, I went and bought a couple of crossword puzzle books. I would suggest starting easy and then progressing, because I bought a difficult one and struggled to get through that. But it's been good for your brain and mentally for me. This next one, I want everybody to think about this. I call it's meditation, and I call it me time. This is specifically you. And how many of us really spend quality time or even any time in just uninterrupted, no distraction, meaningful thought? And so it's been power for me, finding a quiet place in my home, being able to get away, put the cell phone down, and really just spending time. And I've seen some wonderful things happen for me just by eliminating all distractions. So this has been a big deal for me. Physically is the next pillar for me, the personal growth area that I wanted to get better at. I'm not the most fit person in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but I want to be. And so for me, I've been intentional about, the morning walks I talked about. Stretching and flexibility. What I've realized is the older I get, the less flexible I am. And so being able to get in the floor and stretch the body out in the morning when I get up, and then maybe again at night, has been an area of growth for me. Yard work, I mentioned I've got a mowing job, and 28 yards requires quite a bit of when you're weed eating and doing all those things. So I'm getting physical activity that way. And I would suggest for anybody to start, maybe 30 or 45 minutes a day of physical activity. Breaking a sweat can pick you up. The next one, maybe the most difficult of physical for me, is better eating habits. I love food and I love the flavors of food, and so I eat everything. And so trying to put it in perspective of what I need to put in my body has been big. Learning to eat better, but then maybe more water. I've consumed more water and kind of eliminated the soft drinks. The next pillar for me of growth is spiritually. I'm a believer, but sometimes, I get off track, and I needed to be more intentional in this area of my life. And so really attacking this one with being intentional with my quiet times. I start every day as well as end every day with this, and seen some power in this. And then surrounding yourself with an accountability group. We all need those people, those group of people around us who we could connect with, and not only share, our personal struggles, but just our triumphs and celebrate those things with other people. I think an accountability group is such a big deal. I've done this through 2 different groups as far as spiritually. With FCA, we do a Tuesday Zoom every week, surrounding ourselves with other people, other believers that you can share with. Our district has started an F3, which is every Friday, and it's a group of our coaches. The F3 is Fayetteville, faith, and family. So we get to share in all 3 of those areas, and that's been fun. Get to know some of our own coaching staff. We're a big district, but getting to know them on a personal level in those areas has been awesome. Daily devotionals, trying to find something each day that I can read that way. Reading the Bible, and I'll just be honest, kind of being transparent here, I was an infant in Scripture. I really was. And so I've dug into those scriptures and searched for translations. Sometimes I don't understand maybe what I'm reading, and that's okay. And so I've got some experts in those fields that I've been able to reach out to and ask what meaning and spending time with those people of really trying to figure out exactly what I read and how to apply that. Praying for others. I think we all get selfish. I know I do. I get selfish when I'm praying. It's always about me. What, Lord, give me something that I can do. And I think, many times the emphasis of our prayers are for ourselves. And so being able to pray for others, I've seen great things happen as a result of this. The next one is professionally. Really, there's no excuse whatsoever for any of us coaches or really anybody with the slowdown of, what are you doing to get better? And there's no excuses for not taking advantage of some of these opportunities through virtual clinics. A lot of them are free right now. So I've had our staff search and research, maybe scheme, maybe X's and O's, but maybe culture, whatever it is. We've really tried to find ways to get better through these virtual clinics. Podcast. When I talk about loading my library up, my Apple up with music, I've also done some podcasts to where I can really dig in deep. I've studied, leaders in management or maybe business leaders through these podcasts, other coaches, seen some good things and heard some good things through this. And at any time I'll share some of that stuff if anybody's interested in some of those areas. Networking with people I admire. We've had opportunities to do some things during this downtime. People have been really good with us as far as whether it was through phone calls, text messages, letters that I talked about earlier, but then Zoom meetings. I think the whole world is caught up in the Zoom, and maybe I think that's a good thing. And we may use these Zoom meetings even when we come out of the coronavirus, just because of the connection piece and being able to see everybody at one time and communicate. But we've been blessed with this area professionally. I mentioned my staff earlier with Ronnie and Nikki, playing college and playing professionally. We've had Roy Williams on, who was my Coach Bradford's assistant, and he came on with our staff and did a professional development with us, and we got to ask questions, and there's been several others as well. The organization for me is been a big area of growth and being able to reorganize. I write everything down. If I read it, if I see it, if I hear it, I'm writing everything down like a mad scientist. I've set up an office downstairs at home. Drives my wife crazy, but it allows me to be able to really concentrate. And then I've gone back and edited those notes that I write down. When I say I write everything down, I've cleaned those notes up, and then had a specific filing, putting them in places where I can go back and really label those or title those to where I can find them. Been an avid note taker, which is an area of growth for me. And then I mentioned a second ago the staff meetings, just constant communication with my staff, so we're all on the same page moving forward. I think it's important. I've been intentional about a daily script because I wanted to touch in all four of these areas of growth. And so being intentional about touching each one of those areas each day, for me, it's just a priority list. And it's doing the things that matter most, putting things on paper so you can go back and really look at those things and being intentional about doing the things that matter most. Whether it's telling your wife, your kids, your close ones, you love them and how you doing, reaching out to different people, asking if you can do anything for them. There's a lot of people that are struggling and going through some stuff. And so being able to reach out and lift others up. And then at the end of the day, for me, on that daily script is having a glass of red wine and making sure I get a good night of sleep. That's a full day. If you can come up with a daily script to where you're intentional about touching areas, that's been big. Daily action steps. A lot of you know Kevin Eastman. He spent time with Doc Rivers, the Boston Celtics, the Clippers organization, and I've studied him a little bit and dug into him. And once I did, I started realizing that a lot of his daily action steps were some of the things that I was doing myself. And so I've used some of his stuff and compared it with mine as far as the daily action. I mentioned the priority list, but just focusing on priorities, do those things that are going to make a difference. So when you're putting a daily script today, maybe of importance, but also things that are going to make a difference. And then implementing something every day. Each day provides all of us an opportunity to produce something, to produce results. And I believe results matter. Once you get those results, being able to reflect on those, maybe going back and challenging yourself on those and seeing what you come up with. Seeking feedback and support. You learn from experience. Learning from experience requires feedback from people you respect. But I would say go a step beyond that. Go to people that are going to tell you the truth. Get that honest feedback, which is important. I think, being able to surround yourself with other leaders, people that you maybe share experiences with, but aren't just going to be yes, that looks good, that challenge you, and they're going to tell you the truth. And then being able to apply, looking for opportunities to use your new skills and knowledge and apply those things. So those are the daily action steps. Growth for me is removing clutter. Being able to forgive. I've seen this in my own life, Jeremy, of just being intentional about making things right. We all carry around burdens, maybe resentment, and those things have control over you. They really do. And so once you're able to get to a point where you can remove that by forgiving somebody else or maybe saying you're sorry, and I've gone back and done that with a few people that I really feel like, maybe pride got in the way over the years or whatever it was, that I just couldn't make that thing right. So being able to remove that clutter has been big, and just being able to eliminate things that distract you from being your best. And that's all it is removing that clutter from your life. Just that weight of the world's off your shoulders when you're able to do those things and patch maybe something up that you never thought would be able to patch up. So I've seen that in my own life, and that's growth. And then lifting people up, be a light. When I mentioned people all over the world really are struggling with different things. Maybe it's, some health issues of their family members. Maybe it's just the mental, of what's next. People are struggling. And so being able to lift others up has been a big deal. Counting our blessings, that's growth. I've got a relatively healthy body and mind right now, in a good place. I've got an awesome family. And then this next one, I think for coaches, this is, I shared this with our staff and our admin team, and, growth. We got jobs, Jeremy, that, really right now they give us a paycheck. There's others that are without jobs, looking for jobs, have lost their job and wondering how they're going to be able to survive. And we've got jobs in this coaching profession that gives us a paycheck. We're still getting paid during this time. And that's a blessing. And then, not only getting a paycheck, but it's also a job, Jeremy, that allows us to lead and inspire young people. What kind of blessing is that when we get a paycheck, but we're also being able to lead and inspire the next generation? That's such a blessing. I think growth is spending time in quality thought. I talked about meditation earlier, but just focused thought on improving. Be a learn-it-all. I saw this. Kevin Easton shared this with me. I think it's a Don Meyer quote, actually, that he got. But be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. I don't have all the answers. I don't. But I want to be able to learn and, really get better because of that. Never let an opportunity to let people know that not only you value them, but what you value in them pass you by. I've done this with my staff through our end of the year evaluations on each individual staff with them through a Zoom, where it was really a personal Zoom session with my staff members, and just the confidence and that you can give in people of sharing those to every one of them. Sometimes we're real quick to point out weaknesses maybe, or areas of growth. But I think, surrounding yourself with people, but then also being able to tell them what you value in them is such a big deal. Are you getting better every day? Or are you just being content with maintaining? And I think that's a question we all have to ask during this time. I've asked my staff this question. Are we getting better every day, or are we just content? And I want to get better, and I know our staff does as well. Coming out of this, be selfish, take care of yourself first. I told every one of our staff, and I believe this, I think you got to take care of yourself first. Be a leader and show more love for your spouse, your kids. Self-care increases our overall well-being. I believe this. By improving ourselves and our self-care, our families, our players, our staff, and our community gets our very best. And so that's my hope with this personal growth, that you take those actions for yourself, because you're going to make all those people around you better. It'll be the best version of you. And that's what we're after. Then with our players, building trust and relationships with their families, maybe their AAU coaches or their summer coaches, the support group around them, being able to connect with those guys or gals that are around our players. Our players are going to benefit from our personal growth. I 100% believe this. When I challenge my staff and other staffs across the region and the country, I just think by taking care of yourself, our players, are going to benefit from our personal growth when we come out of this. People will follow if they know they can trust you and see that you genuinely love and care for them. My own personal belief, and these are, when I say my own personal belief, this is what I believe, and you can take it for what it's worth, but I think God is preparing us for what's next. I really do. I'm 100% convinced of this. All these uncertainties and unknowns, and there's lots of them. Our country right now is, it can get dark, especially if you see all the things that are happening all over the country. You get caught up in that stuff, and there's many uncertainties, unknowns, maybe fears, I would say, and I've had them. I know my kids have had them in my family, and as well as our players. And so, those uncertainties or unknowns, I would say lean into God. My favorite verse, James 4:8, and I've seen this, is draw close to God and God will come close to you. So I would take those uncertainties, those unknowns, those fears, and really lean into God. And that is my personal growth plan.
Coach, that was awesome. One of the questions that came up here in the chat is, what books do you recommend that you've read over the quarantine?
Yeah, Jeremy, there's been several that have been given to me or recommended. The one that I'm reading right now that I'm really liking, because it kind of changes maybe the mindset for all of us when we're setting goals, is called Burn Your Goals. And it's Josh Medcalf, and it's been really good. It's one of those books that when I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. And I think I've got maybe 2 or 3 chapters left, and I just ordered this and got it delivered last week. And so it's a good one. There's a book called Speed of Trust that's really good. Another one called Switch. And so those 3 are kind of the books that I've located and had other people tell me, you need to really look at this. And so they've been big for me.
And similarly, I'm a big podcast guy. What stands out that you've listened to?
The Ace Files, Coach Neighbors, Mike Neighbors at Arkansas. He's a podcast guy, and so he's put me on to some of these that I never thought I would. And then locally, the Hog Pod. But I try to find podcasts, Jeremy, that of business leaders, of people that have been highly successful. And, you know, you can search for those, but there's several out there that you can find. The Positive View is one. John Gordon is good if you, you know, you like the positive mindset, which I think all of us need from time to time. He's good. Coach Neighbors also put me on what's called London Reels. And so I would search that one, and some of the things that are going on with him are good.
Cool. Any other questions out there for Coach? Well, Coach, we're quickly realizing the number of basketball junkies in Northwest Arkansas. So Heath, who's on the call, and Nate, who just jumped off, we're planning a trip down there sometime this fall, and we'll have to look you up, and maybe we can talk shop a little bit.
No, I'd love that, Jeremy. Anytime you're welcome. And I got to come by the gym and maybe check out a practice or so.
Absolutely. Yep, we'd love that. Well, I appreciate you being on. We've got this recorded. We'll get this out, and then I'll send that to you as well.
That sounds great, Jeremy. I really appreciate you know, what you do and how you're promoting the game and trying to grow the game. It means a lot to a lot of us, so thank you.
I really appreciate that. Take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.